Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about melody, specifically breaking down melody into more digestible chunks, making it make more sense to you. We're going to be composing several melodies. So let's go ahead and jump into melody. Any melody can be described with 8 characteristics. And they are short, long, contrasted, similar, tonal, atonal, and this is timbral consistency and timbral variation. It's basically flux. So let's go over each one. So short is, so if we have a violin sound, for example, they can play short sounds and they can also play long sounds, right? They can do like a little pluck on their violin, and then they can also do a long bowed sound. So a violinist would be capable of both short and long, but some sounds such as a glockenspiel would be limited to just short melodies. So I'm sure you could think of several other things that are limited, such as a pluck sound. Now, we also have contrasted melodies and similar melodies. Contrasted melodies are melodies that have short and long phrases. So maybe we have a melody that goes da nut 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 na na nut 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 na 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 nut nut. We have this short and long intertwined together that is contrasted versus a similar melody where everything is taken on with a similar approach. Legato or staccato melodies are this kind of a melody. So it'd be one that's like do 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 do. It's like all short versus maybe a long melody would be like na 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 na, something like that. So okay, cool. So we can have these, and some instruments are inherently limited by their construction. So we've got that down, or some sounds. So we can have tonal melodies and atonal melodies. You might be going atonal melodies. Look up breakcore or renoise breakcore. Those are atonal melodies. Melodies that they're usually very rhythmically dependent, but they definitely have a melody and they have pitch. But what kind of a key they're working in is sort of a mystery. It's like this. It sounds very noisy. And we're not really going to be making atonal melodies here. That's usually experimental melodies. They do occasionally pop up in popular works, but generally not so much. And by popular works, I'm thinking of like popular drum and bass. This is what I'm saying right now. I'm struggling to think of one right now, but I'm sure someone will list one off the top of their head down below. And then tonal melodies are obviously melodies that fit into a key. And it's not necessarily a Western key. It could be a world key where you have microtonal scales, but they are focused around, they have an order of importance, a hierarchy when creating music. Atonal typically has this order confused. So you know how we work in the key of C major? C is the most important tone in that set of notes. Well, in atonal, we're kind of like, is C the most important? Like probably not. They're all equal in ideal atonalism, but there's like different ideas on it. So we have also timbral, consistency, and variation. So is our sound source capable of changing? This is generally expressivity of the sound source. Like if we had a square wave and we filter it down to a sine wave over the course of a note to convey some musical idea, that would be a timbral variation. If we had our violinist go from a broad stroke to a much more narrow, intimate stroke. I'm not sure if that made any sense because I don't play the violin, but you get the idea. They change the way they stroke their violin to convey an emotion. That is timbral variation. And some instruments have an element of this built into it inherently. Any instrument played by a human, usually. So think of like clarinet, flute, trumpet. They're going to change over time in little ways, subtle ways. It makes them seem a little more real. Generally, this isn't a rule, but generally, timbral variation is a measurement of how interesting a sound is. So you can have stuff that's way too variable, but things that have variation in them are more interesting to us than things that have less variation. And it's like subtle variations usually. So let's go ahead and create some variations on this. So I'm going to use a sine tone just to do it very simply. So a short melody. Let's make a short melody. So to do that, I'm going to come in here and just go ahead and begin plopping down some notes. And we're moving pretty slow, so I'm going to write pretty closely together. And when you're writing melodies, okay, so this is why I want to write some so I can explain what I'm sort of think of. I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna jump up here to an A from an A, and I just ran up an A minor. But then melodies will have stepwise motion a lot. So for example, if I were to go from here to here, I might want to close this interval with some extra notes to convey a meaning. In this case, I'm not going to, but I could like do something like that, right? And it would sound like this. This would be a little sloppy because there'd be a gap right there, but that's fine. So that could be interesting, or we could just do this. So I forgot how slow this tempo was. So let's go ahead and... So that's going to be the first part of my melody. And I'm not going to go over all the melodic tools and interventions, whatever that means, and all the tools that we have available, because that's covered in my MIDI music theory series. So you can go check that out. But we see we have an idea, and I'll say, oh, I want to continue that idea. I don't want to make it into a repeating phrase, though. So I'm going to vary up my idea. I sort of lost what I was thinking. I had this part. I was like, oh, I know what I want to do. But that happens when you're writing melodies. So we have this. Whatever. I'd finish it out. So anyways, that's an example of a short melody. I don't want to bore you with all this like attempting to fix all the notes and everything, but that's the process you would go through. So let's go ahead and write out a long one. So a long melody is pretty simple dimple. We'll do a something like this, and I'm going to turn on we'll leave it like this. So I'm going to fix up this, and I'm also going to come in here and turn on mono. I'm going to do. So see, we have this is a long melody. And we could even add vibrato. So like something like that. So you get the idea. That's not quite the phrase I had in mind, but I would come in here and fix it up. Now we could have things that are contrasted. So right now, those melodies have both been similar. We could build a contrasted melody by doing something like this. We could take away the slur here and maybe add a short little run here. And these are often, you could use ornaments to embellish your melody, and it would draw it closer to a contrasted quality instead of a similar quality. So if you were to be like do 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 do, instead it could be do 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 do. You've added these little notes to embellish it, and it creates a little contrast. That's why ornaments can be considered fancy. Is you're making it a little more difficult to play, which is part of the reason why they're fancy. But you've created a contrast. See, that was a terrible contrast, but you get the idea. So there we go. There's a contrast. We're like, oh, that was like unexpected a little bit. Like we've shifted the balance of expectation. Part of the reason why contrasted melodies, if done well, can be very compelling, because you're trained to expect something if they repeat a contrasting part, but as soon as they vary it, there's not really a way to see it coming unless you've heard the song before. So they're very compelling melodies. Versus similar melodies, you can generally guess what the next sound is going to sound like. It's just a matter of figuring out what note it is. So, all right, that's that. Now we have tonal and atonal. I'm going to spare you on this. We've been writing tonal melodies, and we won't worry about atonal. You probably aren't going to be writing atonal melodies right out the door. And then finally, we have timbral consistency versus timbral variation. Now, our sound right here is just a sine wave, but I can vary it in other ways, such as effects. So I could have my sound vary over time. Let's vary it. This is an FM synthesizer, so let's vary it using some FM. Right, so let's say that's the sound. Well, I could create a variation over time of the sound. This isn't necessarily expressivity. It would be just included in the sound. But what I've done is I've turned on a volume envelope for that sound. So now it'll sound like this. So that's not necessarily tasteful. But you get the idea. We're varying it up over time. If we were to go to something like, let's say, for example, our violins, see there's lots of subtle variation, and it sounds really nice. So that's what we're looking at there. So that sound comes up so slow, though, it'd be difficult to write a melody with it. They're not really agile. If you were, it'd have to be a long one. You can't write short melodies with a sound that takes that long to get loud. So that's timbral consistency and timbral variation. So my challenge to you is to make 9 unique melodies that outline different aspects of this, and to share your melodies with us, maybe even provide MIDI files, and put a link down below to your explanation of the ideas that went into creating your melodies. Along creating your melodies, it would be cool if you included a variety of tempos. Maybe you did 2 long melodies, but at different tempos, and then explained the process you went through. If you are so inclined, you can also check out the rhythm series and try implementing varieties of meter into your melodies, and even use different DAWs. It'd be really cool to see some Ableton, some Renoise, some sheet music, whatever floats your boat, some variation, and then explain how you sort of changed your thinking process about melody creation and those DAWs. Methods for creating, I sit here and so for creating a melody, you just saw me do several, but I didn't really explain a ton. But one thing that I find helpful, so in this one, I use mostly theory, and I have things in my head that I've written so many melodies that I just know how things will look when I write them down. You see, I'm not 100% accurate, partly because I'm thinking about other things right now. But if you just sing out a melody like do 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 do, and then you just sit here and you try and make that appear and sound exactly the way you sang it. And the more you do that, the better you'll get. And so, because I'm assuming that with your voice, it's a very intuitive process. Find an instrument that you know really well and play out a melody, and then write that melody down. Don't settle till you've written it down as you had played it. Maybe you'll have to record yourself, because when I was starting out, I couldn't remember what I had sung because I was trying so freaking hard to get it to sound like what I had played. The more you do this, the better you'll get, and the easier melodies will come to you. After that, I would recommend embellishing your knowledge with keys and chords and the tools that I talked about in the MIDI music theory, that series that I talked about. Go there, check that out. And after that, you'll find yourself creating melodies pretty easily. One thing that you can do is you can, after you've written out a tool, you can then vary up your melody and make things more complicated, similar to what we did with the chord progressions. So for example, you know from the series that we should have a clear focal point and interesting contours. So what we're going to do is we're going to write out, let's get rid of that. Okay, cool. Oh, and we also, the length has changed because the envelope was on. I totally missed that the first time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to write out a very simple idea, right? So we're going to go do, do, do. And this is what I do with people who come in for tutoring, and they have to write 4-part harmonies and stuff, and they are just lost. Like, they cannot think of melodies. I'm like, all you got to do. Now they have chord structures and stuff, so that helps them even more. But we're just working here with this scale, so it's basically the same thing. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna write out a simple melody. See, so I just picked notes in the scale. It sort of made sense, and I generated an image or that looked interesting. And I'm like, because a lot of times they can't hear what it's gonna sound like in their head, and it's a big stopper for them. The chords will aid them in writing a melody that sounds good. They just can't hear it in their head. So you write out something in the key, and you stick to notes that are in the key, so referred to as diatonic. So you stay diatonic, you pick notes in the key, and we're gonna play it out. And it's a very simple melody. See, like it's just a couple bricks basically. The shortest note we have is a 8th note. So here's what we have. And then let's say, you want to make it more interesting. Now you can grab some tools from the melody series or the MIDI music theory and use them. So now we could go like, hey, let's fill that in. That could be more melodically interesting. And we have a gap here, so we could fill that in too. Now this is just using passing tones basically, but they're interesting moves. They'll make our sound more like a melody. Now, jump this actually, that's not too big of a jump, but we could fill this in, and now we'll have a nice little run, depending on the key we're working in too. So like, hey, that could be like the beginning of something. Maybe that didn't fit your vibe, so you could go back and you could try some different tools, some neighbor tones or whatever, and make some really interesting things. So that's my advice for melodic writing when you're new, but nothing beats being able to sing out a melody and write down what you just sang. That's like the ultimate right there. And then you need to become fluent enough in an instrument or with your voice or however method you like to come up with melodies. Maybe it's whistling. And once you can do that, you can vibe out a really cool melody, and then all you have to do is transcribe it, and away you go. So if you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.